morning, everyone. So, today we're going to be talking about permanent teeth. We're basically going to have an overview on all the permanent teeth that we've discussed in the earlier lectures. We're going to do like a detailed comparison between the anterior teeth, incisors, maxillary, mandibular, premolars, molars, all those. Okay? So, let's start with last week's quick question. The distal cusp on the permanent maxillary molars is also called a. So the answer is going to be talon's cusp. Okay. The primary cusp triangle in maxillary molars is, we all know that it's formed by the mesiolingual, mesiobuccal, and distobuccal cusps. The distolingual cusp is not a part of it. It's not a part of the primary cusp triangle. So it's an extra cusp, so any abnormally present cusp is also called talon's cusp. Remember, the mesiolingual cusp of the maxillary molars is called cusp of Carapelli. Remember that. That is not going to be talon's cusp. Talon's cusp is just something that's abnormally there, not part of the primary cusps that are present on the teeth. Okay, let's start with maxillary central incisors. So the first thing we should know about maxillary central incisors is that it has 3 mamelons and 4 developmental lobes. Okay, so the mamelons, remember how we discussed it before when patients, especially pedo patients, if they have an anterior open bite, they're more prone to developing mamelons. So you have, oh, what am I doing over here? So you have 3, and it's like separated because they're coming out. So this is 1, 2, and 3. Those are 3 mamelons. And 4 lobes. So what are 4 developmental lobes? These lobes are primary centers for calcification and primary sections involved in the tooth's development. Okay, so each part of the tooth attributes to its development and its calcification. So now, this picture exactly shows you these 4 developmental lobes. You have the distal labial lobe, the middle labial lobe, mesiolabial lobe, and lingual lobe. So these are the 4. So the labial aspect of the maxillary central is divided into 3 parts. Just remember that. That means it has 3 lobes. Hence, you have 3 mamelons, right? And then an extra lobe is the lingual lobe. Okay, lobes are represented as cusps in posterior teeth. Okay, so in the anterior teeth, lobes are like what we're looking right now in the picture. But in the permanent teeth, they're all cusps. The minimum number of lobes of any tooth to develop is 4. Always keep that in mind. Any tooth, no matter how small, how big it is, anterior or posterior, maxillary or mandibular, the minimum number of lobes is always 4. It can be more than 4, but it can't be less. Okay. So here I put a summary for the number of lobes of all the teeth. So here we have all anterior teeth. We have 3 labial and 1 lingual. That's 4. Premolars, you have 3 buccal and 1 lingual, which is basically the same as the anterior. Instead of labial, it's buccal. We have an exception though. The mandibular second premolar has 3 buccal and 2 lingual. 5. Okay, so just keep that in mind. First molars have 4 lobes, 5 if cusp of Carapelli is present. Mandibular have 5 lobes. Okay. Second molars, maxillary and mandibular, they both have 4 lobes, 1 for each cusp. Third molar, at least 4 lobes, variations are seen. In third molars, there's really, we only know that it must have 4 lobes. There are variations, it can be more, how much more? It's case to case based. And the minimum number of lobes of any tooth to develop is 4. I'm just putting that there out there again because that's an important piece of info. Okay. So, we'll talk about the maxillary central incisor crowns. So it's the largest crown of all incisors. Makes sense because the mandibular incisors are teeny tiny and the maxillary teeth between the anteriors, the centrals, laterals, and canines, the central incisors are the largest, right? Distal outline is more convex than the mesial outline. We already discussed that, I believe. So just think of it like this, like you have your midline and the mesial aspect of it, like how it touches and how straight it is, and it just defines that beautiful midline. remember that it's going to be sharp. So the distal outline is going to be more convex as you're going away from the midline. Okay? It's the widest crown mesiodistally of any permanent anterior tooth. So it's wider mesiodistally than facial-lingually. Okay, that's why it's the largest crown, right? Okay, so for the root, we have one root with one single root canal. That's good. Same thickness mesiodistally as facial-lingually. All other anteriors are thicker facial-lingually in the root. This is something important to know too, just in case you get asked. It's always the more you know about the details, the better, always. Okay, surfaces. Mesial curvature of the cervical line is larger than any other tooth. So remember we had the mesial and right over here, this is let's consider this the mesial. The cervical line, the curvature at the cervical line, it's larger than any other tooth because remember, it's in the midline, so everything's going to be nice and exaggerated, and you have that nice papilla coming down into your midline between your centrals, right? So just remember that the mesial curvature on that part is going to be big. And the cingulum is off-center to the distal. Okay. Distinguishing features about the maxillary central incisors is that it has the narrowest incisal embrasures and the greatest axial inclination. So when you look at it occlusally, when you look at it proximally, you're going to see that inclination. Okay. And I just put this picture to remind you of the shape of the teeth from each view, when it's occlusal, when it's proximal, and when it's labial. All right, let's go down to mandibular central incisors. We'll kind of do a comparison. So right off the bat, you're going to remember that mandibular central incisors are smaller than the maxillary central incisors, for sure. The crown is very smooth. Mesial and distal incisal angles are 90 degrees, meaning that they are equally sharp, both of them. It's like the smallest tooth, but it's like equal on each proximal side. Okay, so it has one root and it tapers into a sharp apex, very narrow mesiodistally and wide labiolingually, concave on both mesial and distal surfaces. Okay, on the root, remember, can you see that dip right here? That dip, that's concavity. Okay, surfaces. Labial surface is convex and lingual surface is concave. Makes sense. Since it's a tiny tooth, sometimes it might be hard to see those details because you have your regular wear and tear, you have abrasion, you have attrition, so you might lose some of that detail. So it's not. And the distinguishing feature about this tooth that it occludes. Remember, we discussed this before. It occludes with only one tooth, the maxillary central incisors. That's how you can just keep in mind that, okay, maxillary central incisors, larger crowns, mandibular centrals, they're tiny because they occlude, they're the only teeth in the dentition that occlude with one tooth only. In an ideal intercuspation, this incisal aspect opposes the lingual fossa of the maxillary central. That's exactly where it's situated, right? Okay. Maxillary lateral incisors. Now, for maxillary lateral incisors, the crowns are wider mesiodistally than labiolingually, same as the centrals, right? Still smaller though. It's smaller in all dimension than the maxillary central, except root length, it's the same. Okay, so the crowns are going to be different in size, but the roots remain the same. It has one straight root, but it might tilt distally. You can see that tilt over here on the picture, just a little bit, right? Okay. It has a linguogingival groove on root and crown. I don't know if it's going to show over here. A linguogingival groove? No, I don't think so, but it usually should be here. Okay, as for its surfaces, lingual pits are common. So you can see like a pit over here, and it catches caries. Lingual surface is most concave of any incisors. Okay, distal incisal corner is more rounded than the maxillary central. Good. All right. With occlusion, it opposes the incisal edge of the mandibular lateral and canine. Yep, that makes sense too. Distinguishing features, it may be congenitally absent. You might find people who are missing their maxillary laterals, and usually what happens is sometimes they either close it or okay. It has a linguogingival groove on root and crown. I don't know if it's going to show over here. A linguogingival groove? No, I don't think so, but it usually should be here. Okay, as for its surfaces, lingual pits are common. So you can see like a pit over here, and it catches caries. Lingual surface is most concave of any incisors. Okay. Distal incisal corner is more rounded than the maxillary central. Good. Alright. With the occlusion, it opposes the incisal edge of the mandibular lateral and canine. Yep, that makes sense too. Distinguishing features, it may be congenitally absent. You might find people who are missing their maxillary laterals, and usually what happens is sometimes they either close it orthodontically, so they have maxillary centrals and then canines. Either they keep it that way, or sometimes they reshape the canines to look like a lateral, and then the first premolar would look like a canine. That would be the treatment. Or some would put implants and just replace the missing teeth. But just remember, it might be congenitally absent. Last anterior tooth to begin calcification. It displays greatest variations in form than any other permanent tooth, except third molars. Okay, so it has variations in form, and remember, it can be congenitally missing. And when you get a question, if you're taking the dental boards, question on your exam, asking what's the most tooth the tooth that's most likely to be congenitally absent out of anterior teeth, you automatically going to see maxillary laterals. Out of posterior teeth, you're going to say third molars. Now, if they ask you about the whole dentition, I just want you to keep in mind that the third molars is going to be the answer. Third molars are more likely to be absent than the maxillary laterals if they're both compared together, okay? And it has variations as well in shape. Okay, let's go to mandibular lateral. We already know that the due to off-centered cingulum, yep, got that. Distal incisal angle are more rounded than mesio-incisal. I mean, pretty much by now, I think every anterior tooth we've gone over, the distal incisal angle is more rounded than the mesio-incisal. So I mean, that's kind of a good thing for it to stick in your head, kind of. The more you repeat it, the more you're going to remember it. It's broader labiolingually than mesiodistally. Okay, this is something new. Because with the maxillary central and maxillary lateral, it's the opposite, right? So just keep that in mind. And the mandibular central, it's equally sized on both proximal areas. So this is broader labiolingually than mesiodistally. Okay, we can see over here. It has one root that's pronounced, and it has pronounced root concavities, especially on the distal, right? Okay. Distinguishing features. Distal contact area is slightly cervical than mesial contact area. Don't worry a lot about the contact areas. I got you guys in another lecture. I'm going to give you like a nice table with like a big summary of all the contact areas between the teeth, because that's important. And so just don't worry about it right now. It might be a little bit fuzzy, it might be a little bit difficult to remember, but that's okay. I got you guys. In an anterior crossbite relationship class 3, as the mandible protrudes, the maxillary contacts the mandibular, canine, and lateral. Okay, so that's good to know as well. We're going to be discussing occlusion in detail in another lecture. And we're going to explain, you know, the contact areas between the teeth, the contact, how the occlusion is in a class 1 relationship where the teeth are situated. We're going to talk about all that. Okay, maxillary canines. All right. So remember, canines are the only teeth in the mouth that have labial ridges. So obviously in the crown, you're going to have a prominent labial ridge. Cingulum is large and centered, wider labiolingually than mesiodistally. Interesting. Just like the mandibular laterals, sorry. Okay. It has the longest root. Remember that when the mandibular canines have the longest crowns. A heavy root results in a bony labial ridge called canine eminence. So if you you can do it with I think the best way to do it is put your finger right over your canine, the canine's crown, and go up to the root, and you can feel like there's a bulging, bony place right on top of the canine crown. If you go left and right, that is called your canine eminence because the root is so thick that it just protrudes out. Okay, the cusp tip is located on mesiofacial part of crown. Mesial cusp ridge is shorter than the distal cusp ridge. Yep. Distinguishing features, least often extracted, together with the mandibular canine. Of course, it's going to be the least often extracted. Have you seen the root? It's huge. So it's going to be very difficult to extract it. Mandibular canines. Okay, the crown, the labial ridge is not as prominent as the maxillary canine, but it's still there. It's wider, it's also wider labiolingually than mesodistally. It has one root. It might be bifurcated into lingual and labial. This is a really important piece of info right here. This can come on the board's exam as well. They're going to ask you, out of all anterior teeth, they're going to give you like anterior teeth or maybe, yeah, I think it was mainly anterior teeth, and they're going to ask you which one fits into labial and lingual. And your answer is going to be mandibular canine, okay? And it has developmental depression, may be present on the mesial root surface. Yeah, we can see it right here just a little bit. Okay. Cusp, the cusp is displaced lingually. Mesial cusp ridge is shorter than distal cusp ridge. Same scenario. Okay. Now, all canines have a mesiolabial developmental depression that is found on the labial crown surface in the incisal third, just mesial to the labial ridge. Okay. That is important to remember. It might come on the exam, it might not, but it is an important piece of information. It's kind of like a distinguishing factor for the mandibular canines, okay? Alright. Maxillary first molar. The crown, it's the widest of all premolars, maxillary and mandibular. Remember, when you undergo ortho treatment, and let's say the orthodontist wants to create more space in between your teeth, so they ended up extracting the premolars, right? Okay, they always end up extracting the first premolars, maxillary and mandibular. Okay. Widest of all premolars, greater buccolingually than mesiodistally, and it has a long cervical occlusally. It's longer cervical occlusally than second premolars, first and second molars. Cervical occlusally means, you know, from the cervical line until the occlusal plane, so it has just a relatively longer crown. It has two roots, buccal and lingual. Makes sense, it's a maxillary posterior. It has two cusps. Lingual cusp is shorter than the buccal, so just remember that. Mesiobuccal cusp ridge is longer than distal buccal cusp ridge. The surfaces, it has a cervical concavity mesially, and it has a prominent buccal ridge. Okay? Right here you can see the buccal ridge. Okay. Mandibular first premolar. The crown is longer and prominent buccal ridge than second premolar. Well, I think by now usually like the first premolar or the first, like let's say between central and lateral, the central, it's always going to be like more prominent. The first premolar is going to have features that are more prominent than the second premolar. Maxillary canine going to have more prominent features than the mandibular canine. Okay, just keep that in mind. The root, it has one root, broader facially than lingually, large cusp, and it has a prominent triangular ridge, small non-functioning lingual cusp. Okay. So it's kind of like the maxillary first premolar too, where the buccal cusp was bigger than the lingual cusp. It occlusally has a transverse ridge and no central groove. That is a good piece of info too. Mesial marginal ridge is more cervical than the distal marginal ridge. So now it's becoming the opposite of the centrals. Remember when we were saying usually the mesial part was always the sharp part, there's always the edgy part, and then the distal aspect of the tooth would be different. So here, they tell you that the mesial marginal ridge is more cervical than the distal marginal ridge. Okay. More cervical means it's lower than the distal marginal ridge, just so that you can imagine it. Okay. Oh, and you can see it over here too. Distinguishing features, it has a developmental groove. Remember, it doesn't have it has a developmental groove, the mesiolingual groove. It separates the mesial marginal ridge from the mesial cusp slope of the small lingual cusp. Masticatory functions of first mandibular molar is similar to that in mandibular canine. That's also an important piece of information. Okay, maxillary second premolar. The crown is obviously smaller than the first premolar, and it's wider faciolingually than mesiodistally. I mean, even you can tell by just having your tongue stroke your teeth at the back, and you can tell right away, right after you canine, that there's something bulging out there. That's your premolars. It has one root, two cusps. Buccal and lingual are equal in height. Okay. Distobuccal cusp ridge is longer than the mesiobuccal cusp ridge. It has no mesial developmental groove, and it's less prominent buccal ridge. Remember, we always said that the first teeth are always going to be the most prominent. It's occlusal pattern. It has a shorter central groove with more supplemental grooves. Okay, similar. Okay. Now, for the mandibular second premolar, it has three cusps. Three cusp pattern is a shaped groove. Two cusp pattern is U-shaped or H-shaped. This is important to know. This is specifically just for mandibular second premolar, okay? And remember, it's the one that has 5 lobes because it might have, I think it was the one that had 5 lobes, I believe. We'll go back to that before. The one root apex approximates the mental foramen. Let's not forget about that. So the mental foramen is going to be between the mandibular first and second premolar, but it's kind of closer to the second premolar. Cusp, buccal cusp is shorter. Mesiolingual cusp is larger than distolingual cusp. And it has a central developmental groove. Alright, let's go to the molars now. Maxillary first molar. It's the largest maxillary tooth. No lingual inclination of the crown at all. The root, it has 3 roots. Mesiobuccal root has 2 canals. Mesiobuccal and mesiolingual. Okay, so the roots are mesial, distal, and palatal. Palatal is going to be the largest root, remember that. And if you look at it occlusally, you can see all 3 roots together. And as for the canals, so it has 3 roots, and usually maxillary first molars have 4 canals. The 4th canal is going to be in the mesiobuccal root that has 2 canals, mesiobuccal and mesiolingual, okay? And then one's going to be in the distal and one's going to be in the palatal. The mesiobuccal canal is the smallest canal. It's super tiny. And the largest one is the palatal. Okay, as for cusp, it has 4. 2 buccal. Mesiobuccal is bigger than the distobuccal, and 2 lingual. Mesiolingual, distolingual. Simple. Mesiolingual is always the largest on any posterior tooth. And remember, the mesiolingual is cusp of carapelli. Cusp of carapelli is seen lingual to the mesiolingual cusp. Yes, it's seen lingual. It's not cusp of carapelli, but it's seen lingual to it. This is important too. You need to know where cusp of carapelli is situated on the maxillary molar. The occlusal pattern, it has an oblique ridge which runs from mesiolingual cusp to distobuccal cusp. So just remember, there's a lot going on with the mesiolingual cusp and the maxillary first molar. It has cusp of carapelli lying lingual to it. It has the oblique ridge that starts from it. So just keep that in mind. Distal surface has prominent cervical cavity. You have to keep that in mind, like when you're doing cleanings and scalings or root plannings. That's a really good anatomical feature to know, to keep in mind. Okay, let's see if the mandibular first molar is any different. So the crown, it's the largest mandibular tooth. There we go. The same scenario. Maxillary first molar was the largest maxillary tooth. Mandibular first molar is the largest mandibular tooth and has the largest mesiodistal dimension. Mesiodistal dimension is greater than faciolingual. Root, it has 2 roots with 3 canals. The second canal is in the mesial root. Usually it always is. Cusp, it has 5. 3 buccal, mesiobuccal, mesiodistal, and distal. Two lingual, distolingual, and mesiolingual. Lingual cusps are higher than buccal cusps. That is also like new, because in the maxillary, the buccal was usually bigger than the lingual. Occlusal pattern has two transverse ridges. Its distinguishing feature is that it's considered the cornerstone of the mouth and is the first permanent tooth to erupt. Okay. Maxillary second molar. The crown is smaller than the first molar, obviously, and it doesn't have a distolingual cusp. It has 3 roots, same. It's going to be mesial, distal, and palatal. The cusp of Carapelli is absent. Mesiolingual cusp is largest, distolingual cusp is smallest. So it's kind of like with the cusps, the maxillary cusps make more sense that the buccal aspect of them, or the mesial, are larger and bigger or more prominent, while in the mandibular molars, it's the opposite scenario. Primary cusp triangle is formed by mesiolingual, mesiobuccal, and distobuccal cusp, and it has a small oblique ridge. Mandibular second molar. It's smaller than the first molar. It doesn't have a fifth cusp. It only has 2 roots. Okay. It has 4 cusps, 2 buccal and 2 lingual. So the roots are going to be mesial and distal, by the way. Occlusal pattern, it looks like a plus sign. This is mandibular second molar. Central groove is straight. It has 2 transverse ridges. Distinguishing factors has 1 buccal groove and 1 buccal pit. Maxillary third molar. They have greater morphological variances than any other tooth. We already discussed that, right? They are the shortest permanent tooth. They are often congenitally missing and non-functional. Remember that. Crown tapers more from buccal to lingual. They frequently have only 3 cusps. Distolingual cusp is usually absent. Roots are short and fused. They occlude only with mandibular third molar. So if like you have a congenitally missing mandibular third molar, and the maxillary third molar would have no other tooth to occlude with, so it would super erupt and just come out of the socket because there's no other tooth to keep it in place. So we usually go for extraction in that case. Mandibular third molars have 2 roots, 1 mesial, 1 distal, bulbous crowns, and taper from mesial to distal. Larger mesiodistally than buccolingually. Short roots are often fused. Mesiobuccal cusps are wider and longer than distobuccal cusps, and it has an irregular growth pattern. Alright guys, that's it for today. We had a great overview with all the permanent teeth. The next step is going to be with the primary teeth, and then we're going to discuss in further detail the occlusions, the occlusion pattern. What else did we say? We're going to talk about the contact areas and all those other like remaining tissue, oral tissue. We're going to discuss all of that in the remaining lectures. Have a good one.